Welcome back to another journey into the darker corners of Skyrim. Today we're exploring one of the most disturbing truths hidden in Hermaeus Mora's realm of Apocrypha. The seekers that float through those endless libraries aren't what you think they are. They're not just Daedric servants. There's something far more tragic. They're transformed mortals, scholars who stayed too long searching for forbidden knowledge. And their fate reveals the true horror of what Hermaeus Mora does to those who seek his gifts. This is a story about obsession, about the price of knowledge, about what happens when you can't stop seeking answers even when continuing will cost you everything. It's the story of mages who entered paradise and couldn't leave, who traded their humanity one book at a time until nothing mortal remained. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. I found it in the Arcanium, just a book, leather binding, faded pages, nothing that should have kept me awake for 3 nights straight, but the title wouldn't leave my mind. The Doors of Oblivion. The college mages barely look at books like that anymore. Too busy with their wards and destruction spells to care about some dead mage's travel journal. They stack them in corners, let dust settle between pages that hold secrets they'll never understand. I should have left it there, should have walked past it like everyone else does. But I didn't. The book tells the story of Morian Zenas, the greatest conjuration mage who ever lived. He wrote the definitive text on Oblivion, the realms of the Daedric princes. But that wasn't enough for him. He wanted more than theory, more than speculation based on summoned Daedra and ancient texts. He wanted to see those realms with his own eyes. So he found a way in, a dangerous, terrible way that involved exploiting portals created by a Telvanni wizard who'd been missing for decades. Zenas had an apprentice, Saif Ij-Hijja, who wrote down everything his master told him through a telepathic link they'd accidentally developed. That apprentice became our only window into what Morian Zenas discovered. At first, the entries were clear, precise, scholarly observations about realms of ash and smoke, cities of brutality, gardens of impossible beauty. Zenas described each plane methodically, cataloging details like he was recording flora in a forest. His mind was sharp, his observations were brilliant. Then he entered Apocrypha. The change in his words was immediate. Where before he spoke in complete sentences describing architecture and atmospheric conditions, suddenly his messages became fragments, whispers. The apprentice wrote that Zenas described an endless library, shelves stretching in every direction, stacks upon stacks, pages floating on winds he couldn't feel. Every book had a black cover, no titles, no authors, just infinite knowledge wrapped in unmarked bindings, and ghosts. He felt ghosts moving through the stacks, searching, always searching, rifling through books, never stopping, never finding what they needed. That's when Morian Zenas stopped talking regularly to his apprentice. The realm of Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric Prince of Knowledge and Fate, had caught him in its web. The same passions that drove Zenas on Nirn, his hunger for research and forbidden truths, became his chains in Apocrypha. His apprentice tried frantically to reach him, called out through their mental link, even tried conjuration spells to summon him back like he was a Daedra himself. But Zenas refused to leave. 6 months between whispers, 5 years, 3 years, each message less coherent than the last, no longer words in any recognizable language, just fragments of thoughts from a mind that had been consumed by the very knowledge it sought. The apprentice's final words in the book haunt me. Morian Zenas was lost, perhaps still in Apocrypha, lost but happy in a trap he refused to escape. I put the book down after reading that, sat in the dim light of the Arcanium for an hour, just staring at the candles flickering against stone walls. A mage brilliant enough to write the definitive text on Oblivion, powerful enough to find a way into those realms, reduced to incomprehensible whispers from a library of forbidden knowledge. But something about it didn't fit. The ghosts, those ghosts Zenas described, endlessly searching through books they could never understand. I'd seen something like that before. In my own travels through Apocrypha, I've read several black books. I know I shouldn't admit that. Each one is supposed to grant power, knowledge beyond mortal comprehension, and they do. I can feel the changes Hermaeus Mora's gifts have made in me, skills I never had before, understanding of concepts that should have taken decades to master. But each time I open one of those black-bound tomes, each time I feel my consciousness pulled from my body and dragged into that realm of poisonous ink and writhing tentacles, I see them. The Seekers, those grotesque creatures with bodies of twisted flesh and tentacles. They float through Apocrypha's halls, guarding the knowledge stored there. Most people who encounter them only see monsters, Daedric servants of Hermaeus Mora, dangerous things that drain your strength and banish you with sonic attacks. But I watched one when it didn't know I was there. I'd used an invisibility potion trying to sneak past a particularly dangerous section of the Endless Library. The Seeker didn't detect me, it just floated there in front of a bookshelf. And then it did something that made my blood run cold. It reached out with one of its tentacled appendages. The movement was delicate, careful. It pulled a book from the shelf and began turning the pages, not attacking, not guarding, reading, or trying to. Because as I watched longer, I realized it couldn't actually comprehend what it was seeing. Its tentacle moved across the pages in a pattern that suggested familiarity, muscle memory from another life, but there was no understanding, just endless repetition. Turn the page, scan the words, move to the next page, over and over. It looked like someone searching for something they could never find, just like the ghosts in Morian Zenus's account. That's when the pieces started connecting. Hermaeus Mora draws mortals to his realm through black books scattered across Tamriel, artifacts bound in lurker leather, written with ink brewed from seeker parts for 10 years, pressed on paper from trees that never saw sunlight. When you read one, your body stays in Mundus while your consciousness gets pulled into Apocrypha, connected by the thinnest thread. Most who enter are overwhelmed. The infinite knowledge fractures minds that can't process truths no mortal should know. The plane itself is maddening, an endless sea of black ink beneath a sickly green sky, towers of books reaching into nothing, tentacles writhing through poisonous waters, everything designed to break you, and those who stay too long, who become obsessed like Morian Zenas did, who refuse to leave even when they still can. What happens to them when their bodies in Mundus finally die? When that thin tether snaps and they're trapped in Apocrypha forever? I started researching carefully. I couldn't let the other mages know what I was investigating. They'd think I'd gone mad. Maybe I have, but I needed to know. The official texts all say the same thing. Seekers are Daedra, servants of Hermaeus Mora, native to Apocrypha. They guard forbidden knowledge and destroy intruders. That's what every book in the Arcaneum says, but none of those books explain why Seekers read when they think no one's watching. None of them explain the pattern in how they move through the libraries, checking and rechecking the same sections over and over, like they're looking for something specific they can no longer remember. None of them explain why, when you observe them long enough, you can see traces of behavior that looks almost scholarly. I found other accounts, fragments, mentions in old journals of mortals entering Apocrypha and never returning. The apprentice's book about Morian Zenas wasn't the only one. Dozens of mages over the centuries have entered Hermaeus Mora's realm, seeking knowledge. Most died quickly, minds shattered by revelations they couldn't handle. But some, the ones with the strongest wills and the deepest hunger for learning, they lasted longer. Long enough for Apocrypha to change them. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are the Seekers really just Daedra, or is there something darker at work in Hermaeus Mora's realm? The transformation isn't instant. That's what makes it so insidious. Hermaeus Mora doesn't just grab mortals and twist them into new shapes. He's patient. He operates on timescales we can't comprehend. Years, decades, centuries. Time moves differently in Apocrypha anyway. What feels like hours might be months. What feels like days might be years. The first stage is the madness. Your mind starts to fracture under the weight of too much knowledge. Truths you were never meant to understand crash against the foundations of your sanity. You start to see connections between things that have no connection, patterns in chaos, meaning in randomness. The books in Apocrypha contain everything, every secret, every forbidden truth, every answer to questions you didn't know existed, and you can't stop reading. That's the trap. Hermaeus Mora gives you exactly what you came for. Knowledge. Real, genuine, world-shattering knowledge. Not lies, not tricks, just pure information that rewrites everything you thought you knew about reality. And once you start absorbing it, once you feel that rush of understanding flooding through your consciousness, you need more, always more. I've felt it myself, standing in those halls of black-bound books, feeling the pull, just one more tome, just one more secret. I'll leave after this one. I promise I'll leave after I understand this one concept. But there's always another book, always another mystery. And Hermaeus Mora knows this. He's counted on it for eons. The madness comes in stages too. First, you lose track of time. Hours blend into days, days into weeks. You forget to eat, but you don't feel hungry in Apocrypha anyway. You forget to sleep, but the knowledge keeps you awake, buzzing through your thoughts like a swarm of wasps you can't quiet. Then, you lose language. Not all at once, gradually. Words start to feel inadequate for the concepts you're learning. How do you describe things that exist outside normal reality? How do you explain truths that contradict the basic laws of existence? Your vocabulary fails you. You start thinking in fragments, in images, in sensations that have no names. Morian Zenus's apprentice documented this perfectly. The messages started as full sentences, became partial thoughts, eventually degraded into sounds that might have been words in some forgotten language, or might have been nothing but the screaming of a mind that couldn't contain what it had learned. But the physical changes, those come later, and they're permanent. I found documentation of this in a place I shouldn't have been able to access. There's a section of Apocrypha called the Feral Gallery. Most mortals never see it. Hermaeus Mora keeps certain experiments there. Creatures he's collected, knowledge he's preserving, and mortals who serve him in ways that require protection from his realm's more dangerous inhabitants. I only glimpsed it once, through a portal that opened and closed before I could decide if I wanted to step through. But in that glimpse, I saw shelves lined with urns, and I heard something that made my skin crawl. Voices, conversation, between things that shouldn't be able to speak. A seeker was talking to something called an urn organ, and the seeker had a voice. It spoke with a lisp, the words wet and wrong coming from a mouth that wasn't designed for language, but it was speaking, discussing things with intelligence, with understanding. Seekers pretend they can't talk. That's what I realized. They can understand speech, they can utter it, but they hide this ability. Maybe because speaking reminds them too much of what they used to be. Maybe because Hermaeus Mora prefers his servants to appear as mindless guardians rather than as the conscious, thinking beings they actually are. The physical transformation happens as your mind breaks down. The realm itself corrupts mortal flesh. Apocrypha isn't just a place, it's alive in ways that defy explanation. The black ink that covers its surface isn't water, it's something else, something that seeps into you the longer you're exposed to it. The air carries particles of knowledge so dense they have physical weight. Your body starts to change to survive in that environment. Or maybe it changes because Hermaeus Mora wills it, or maybe the knowledge itself rewrites your flesh the same way it rewrites your mind. I don't know which is true. Maybe all of them are. The skin goes first, becomes gray, rough, loses its human texture, then the limbs, they elongate, fingers fuse together or split apart depending on what Mora needs. Tentacles grow from places where arms and legs used to be. Your face collapses in on itself, eyes multiply or disappear. Your mouth becomes something that can produce sounds but shouldn't, and through it all, You're aware. That's the horror that keeps me awake. You don't lose consciousness during the transformation. You feel every change, every alteration to your body. Every piece of your humanity that gets stripped away and replaced with something that serves Hermaeus Mora's purposes better. But you also can't stop reading. Even as your hands become tentacles, you reach for books. Even as your eyes multiply and your vision fragments into impossible perspectives, you try to absorb more knowledge. The hunger doesn't stop just because your body is being rewritten. If anything, it gets worse. I've seen it in how the Seekers move. They patrol the libraries with purpose. Yes, they attack intruders, but watch them during the quiet moments. Watch them when they think no mortal is observing. They drift toward the bookshelves. Their tentacles reach out with that same delicate, almost reverent movement I saw before. They turn pages they can no longer read, searching for understanding that's been locked away behind the walls of their transformed minds. They remember being scholars. They remember the feeling of learning something new. But they can't actually comprehend anymore. The knowledge that destroyed their minds also destroyed their ability to process new information. They're trapped in an eternal state of seeking without finding, searching without understanding, reading without comprehension. That's what Hermaeus Mora does to his most devoted followers. He preserves their hunger while removing their ability to satisfy it forever. And it's not just Seekers. The Lurkers are the same, those massive tentacled creatures that emerge from Apocrypha's poisonous waters. They were mortals too, ones who dove too deep into forbidden knowledge, who submerged themselves in the ink seas trying to reach secrets at the bottom. The realm transformed them into something that could survive underwater, something massive and powerful, but also something that lost all trace of what it used to be. During the Second Era, there was even a group of Hermaeus Mora worshippers who called themselves Seekers, willingly. They took the name of those creatures. Maybe they knew what they were destined to become. Maybe they didn't. But Hermaeus Mora has always been open about what he offers. He promises knowledge. He promises power. He never promises you'll remain human while receiving it. The truly terrifying part is how methodical it all is. Hermaeus Mora doesn't transform mortals out of cruelty. He does it because it's efficient. Every seeker used to be a scholar, someone who devoted their life to learning, someone who had the mental discipline to absorb vast amounts of information. Those are exactly the qualities you want in librarians and guardians of knowledge. So, he lures them in with black books, lets them taste real power, real understanding, gets them addicted to the feeling of forbidden knowledge flooding their consciousness. And then he just waits for them to stay too long, waits for their bodies on Nirn to die while their minds are still wandering his endless shelves, waits for the transformation to complete. And then he has another servant, another scholar turned into a mockery of what they once were, another guardian for his infinite library, another warning to mortals about the price of seeking knowledge that was never meant for mortal minds. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from Skyrim, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. I mentioned Miraak earlier, the first Dragonborn. Everyone knows his story now, how he betrayed the dragons during the Dragon War, how he learned the Bendwell shout from Hermaeus Mora himself and used it to try to rule Solstheim, how he was defeated and trapped in Apocrypha for thousands of years. But nobody talks about what those thousands of years did to him. I saw Miraak when I went to confront him, saw him standing there at the summit of Apocrypha, surrounded by books he'd read countless times. His power was immense, truly immense. He could control dragons with a word. His magic could reshape reality around him. He'd become stronger than almost any mortal in history, but he was also a prisoner. Hermaeus Mora had protected him, yes, saved him from the dragon's vengeance. Taught him secrets no other Dragonborn ever learned, but that protection was just another word for imprisonment. Miraak couldn't leave, couldn't return to Tamriel, couldn't do anything but serve Hermaeus Mora's interest and wander through the same libraries for millennia. He tried to escape. When I arrived, when another Dragonborn entered Apocrypha, Miraak saw his chance. He thought he could use my power to break free, absorb my dragon souls, build enough strength to finally defy Hermaeus Mora and return to the world he'd been torn from thousands of years ago. Hermaeus Mora killed him for that. I watched it happen, watched as tentacles erupted from the poisonous ink beneath our feet, watched as they impaled Miraak through his chest and lifted him into the air, watched as Hermaeus Mora drained him, pulled the knowledge directly from his mind, extracted every secret Miraak had learned in his millennia of service, and then discarded him, let him fall, let him die, because Miraak had served his purpose. He'd been useful for thousands of years, but the moment he tried to leave, the moment he prioritized his own freedom over Hermaeus Mora's interest, he became worthless. That's the fate waiting for everyone who serves the Daedric Prince of Knowledge. Eventually, you're just a container, a repository of information to be harvested and thrown away when you're no longer useful. I saw that same casual disregard for mortal life again when Hermaeus Mora wanted the secrets of the Skull. The Skull are a tribe on Solstheim. They worship the Allmaker, not the Daedra. They've kept their oral traditions safe for thousands of years, secrets about the land, about nature, about knowledge that Hermaeus Mora didn't possess, and that drove him insane, not knowing something, not having access to information that existed in the world but was kept from him. So he used me, told me he wouldn't teach me the final word of Bendwill unless I brought him those secrets. I needed that word to defeat Miraak. I had no choice. The Skull Shaman was named Storn Cragstrider, old man, wise, devoted to protecting his people's traditions. His daughter Freya begged him not to do it, begged him not to open the Black Book, told him it was wrong, evil, against everything he'd taught her. But Storn knew it was the only way to free Solstheim from Miraak's shadow. So he agreed, opened the book, and Hermaeus Mora appeared. I watched as tentacles erupted from the pages, watched as they wrapped around Storn's head. The old man tried to resist, tried to keep the secrets locked away, but Hermaeus Mora doesn't ask permission. He just takes. Storn screamed, actually screamed as Hermaeus Mora pulled the knowledge directly from his mind, ripped thousands of years of oral tradition out of his consciousness, extracted every secret the Skull had protected, every memory, every teaching passed down through generations, and when Hermaeus Mora had what he wanted, he let Storn die. Just dropped. Him. The old man collapsed to the ground, eyes empty, mind completely hollowed out, dead before he hit the floor. Freya screamed at me to do something, but there was nothing I could do. Hermaeus Mora had already gotten what he wanted, and in return, he kept his promise, gave me the word I needed, told me I'd be either a worthy opponent for Miraak or his successor. His successor. Those words echo in my mind constantly now, because I am his successor. When I killed Miraak, when Hermaeus Mora drained the first Dragonborn's knowledge and life, I became the new champion, the new servant, the new prisoner being slowly prepared for the same fate. Every Black Book I've read has strengthened Hermaeus Mora's claim on me. Each one grants power, yes, skills I never could have learned otherwise, understanding of concepts that should take lifetimes to master, but each one also tightens invisible chains I can't see yet but can definitely feel. I notice the signs, small things at first. I dream about Apocrypha now. Even when I'm not reading the Black Books, even when I'm safe in my bed in Skyrim, I close my eyes and see those endless shelves, hear the whisper of pages turning, feel the pull of knowledge just out of reach. I catch myself reading differently. I used to read for pleasure, for understanding. Now, I read with hunger, with need. It's never enough. One book leads to another. One concept demands exploration of 10 more. I've stopped sleeping properly because my mind won't quiet down, won't stop processing, won't stop seeking. And the seekers recognize me. That's what terrifies me most. When I walk through Apocrypha now, some of them just watch. Don't attack. Don't try to drain my strength or banish me with sound. They just observe with whatever passes for sight in their transformed bodies, like they're studying me, like they're waiting. Do they see themselves in me? Do they remember their own early visits to this realm? Do they remember believing they could take knowledge and leave unscathed? That they were special, protected, different from all the others who'd been trapped before them? If you've ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments, would you risk everything for forbidden knowledge, or would you walk away while you still could? Because I can't walk away. Not anymore. I've read too many black books, learned too many secrets. Hermaeus Mora has invested too much in me to let me go. I'm valuable now. A Dragonborn with access to knowledge no other Dragonborn has possessed. A mortal who's proven capable of absorbing truths that would shatter most minds. I'm exactly the kind of scholar Hermaeus Mora prefers to transform into a seeker. The process has probably already started. Not the physical changes, not yet, but the mental ones. The obsession with knowledge, the inability to feel satisfied with what I've learned, the dreams that pull me back to Apocrypha every night. These are the early stages, the same stages Morian Zenas went through. I've tried to resist, tried to stop reading the black books, tried to ignore the pull, but then I'll encounter something I don't understand. Some mystery that needs solving, some question that has an answer hidden somewhere in Hermaeus Mora's infinite library. And I'll think, just one more time, just this once. I'll read one more book and then I'll stop for good. But I never stop. There's always one more mystery, always one more truth to uncover, always one more secret that Hermaeus Mora dangles in front of me like bait on a hook. And he's patient. He has all the time in the world. Literally, he's existed since before mortals could measure time. He'll exist long after Nirn is dust. What's a few years or decades to wait for my resistance to crumble? For my obsession to grow strong enough that I stop leaving Apocrypha voluntarily? For the day when my body dies in Skyrim while my mind is wandering his shelves? I think about Morian Zenas often. Wonder if he's still there, still searching, still unable to find whatever knowledge he was looking for when his mind finally broke. Wonder if he's become a seeker by now, if somewhere in those endless halls, a tentacled creature that used to be the greatest mage who ever lived floats through stacks of books it can no longer comprehend. Wonder if decades or centuries from now, some other scholar will sneak through Apocrypha and see me doing the same thing. Reaching for books with appendages that used to be hands, turning pages I can no longer read, searching for understanding that was stripped away when Hermaeus Mora transformed me into another guardian of his forbidden knowledge. The seekers that guard Apocrypha aren't Daedra. They're warnings. Every single one used to be mortal, used to be a scholar who thought they were clever enough to steal knowledge from the Prince of Fate without paying the price, who believed they were special, who convinced themselves that they'd be different from all the others who came before. But Hermaeus Mora doesn't need to force anyone into service. He just offers knowledge, real knowledge, the kind that rewrites reality, the kind that makes you powerful beyond imagination. And then he waits for you to become so addicted to that feeling that you can't stop seeking more. The transformation into a seeker isn't punishment. It's the natural conclusion of a deal you make the moment you open your first black book. You trade your humanity for knowledge. You trade your freedom for power. You trade your future for understanding. And Hermaeus Mora always collects what he's owed. I can feel his attention on me even now. Even as I tell you this story, he knows I'm revealing his methods, knows I'm warning others about what happens to those who seek forbidden knowledge. But he doesn't care, because warnings don't work. They never have. Someone else will find a black book. Someone else will think they're strong enough to resist. Someone else will convince themselves that they'll be the exception, that they'll take the knowledge and walk away, that they'll never end up like Morian Zenas or Miraak, or the thousands of other mortals who've been transformed into seekers over the ages. And Hermaeus Mora will be waiting, patient, eternal, ready to offer exactly what they desire and take exactly what he's owed in return. I still have time, maybe months, maybe years. My body is still human, my mind is still mostly intact, but I can feel the changes coming, feel the knowledge pressing against the inside of my skull, feel the hunger growing stronger every day. Soon, I'll read another black book, can't help myself, and then another, and another. Each one will grant me more power, more understanding, more of exactly what I crave. Each one will tighten Hermaeus Mora's grip until the day I realize I haven't left Apocrypha in weeks, or months, or years, until the day I look down and see my hands have become tentacles, my eyes have multiplied, my mouth can no longer form words in any mortal language, until the day I become just another seeker, floating through endless halls of black-bound books, searching forever for knowledge I can never again comprehend. The seekers aren't monsters. They're what happens when scholars stay too long in paradise, when the pursuit of knowledge becomes more important than remaining human, when Hermaeus Mora decides your usefulness as a mortal has ended and your service as a guardian should begin. And I'm going to become one of them, not because Hermaeus Mora will force me, but because I won't be able to stop myself from seeking more, from reading more, from learning more, because that's what the Prince of Knowledge does best. He doesn't capture victims, he creates them, offers them everything they've ever wanted, and watches as they voluntarily trade their humanity for it. The seekers that guard Apocrypha were once scholars, mages, researchers, people exactly like me, people who thought they could control their hunger for knowledge, who believed they were strong enough to resist. They were all wrong, and so am I.